Well, let me offer, there's still lots of seats up here. And I would love for you all to come forward. What I'm really wanting is just a clear connection with you. And it's a little harder for me to reach you out there. It is just a request, but we have probably 15 seats up here. And I would love to be close to you, if you're willing. I know some of you don't know me. You might not want that. I'm open to that. All exits are unlocked. What is, yeah. You gonna move it around? No, I just want to turn it off. All right. So I don't have a problem projecting, and so I'm trusting you're hearing me, but I am eager to use the microphone if you're not. But otherwise, it's a bit of an encumbrance. I don't want squelches or having to hold it or whatever's there. So please let me know. If those of you who are back there, if you're not hearing, let me know. I'd love to make an adjustment so you can. Wow, it's kind of just a rush of excitement, I think, moving through me.
I can't see your face.
Okay, I'm going to move around, so you'll see it sometimes anyway. There's a rush of excitement, and my notes are here, so I'm going to have to move up there and go down there. If you're going to create a group that would attract me like a magnet, you have done it. I mean, you are my people. You are, at least the intention of why you came is exactly the intention that is so dear to me. And that I want to share with you some of my experiences of that. So I'm particularly excited. For me, this is the first time that we've had a conference that says, if you're doing this kind of work, come. And inviting a range of trainers to come. It's the first time I've met Marie, for instance. The people who are coming later in the week, I've not met them before. And it's certainly the first time I've had this opportunity to interact on this topic with many of you, even though perhaps we've interacted in other levels. So I am tingly with excitement, I heard that word earlier, of that potential. And really, I'm wanting to use my time here to really create those sort of connections with each person who's directly involved in the work. Because what you'll see in just a minute, I want to share some of the work I've done. Most of this was me going into my own business, me going into other businesses and doing the work and seeing what comes back from doing the work. And the only grounding in me is whatever this quality is of connecting it to needs. Somehow when I'm there, there's a truth that I trust there. And when I connect to that truth, then I move on into that. I move forward with it. So I have immense trust in that, and yet I believe there's immense learning that we can bring together and learn from each other. So that's what I'm particularly excited about. So just for transparency, I put things together. In fact, I woke up at 2 this morning. All right, I'm ready. What am I going to do today? But it's actually deliberate for me. So when I go meet a business, I do the same thing. That is, until I connect with you, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're wanting. And so I would have had an objection to being the first presenter yesterday. So I respect those of you who were, because I can't get my teeth into what's going on here. So I appreciate the opportunity to have a level of connection with you yesterday. And I was finally ready at 2 in the morning to, okay, so I think I can see how, I can connect with you. There's still some anxiety. It's always what's there and how do I connect with you? How do I make this meaningful for why you're here and what I can potentially bring to it? Just for clarity, I invite you to interrupt me at any moment if you have questions of clarity. I want to be sure that what I'm saying is actually understandable to you. But I'm requesting that you hold your other questions until the end. I'd like to have about 15 minutes at the end so that you can ask questions. We can kind of play with it. How is it landing in you? Yes?
Can I just ask if you have materials that you're sharing or not as to what kind of note-taking people might need?
Yeah, I do have materials, and I can share them with you after the fact. And I think the real message I have probably isn't in the notes you're going to take. I'm hoping it's in the connection to the sort of quality of experiences and things that have happened. So I believe you'll get a lot out of it if you take no notes. And I'm willing to offer you some notes, at least for some of the things you see up here. I have notes on those as I make it more particular about what those things are. But either way, if you love taking notes, by all means, move into it. Anything else? So anyone have an issue with my request for questions? I'd like to get some sort of flow here. Here's my challenge here. It's like, all right, this is what I want to share with you, and I have that much time to do it in. And so it's how do I select? What facets do I pick out of what this work is, at least as I see it, and bring to you? And I'm not quite sure. And toward the end, I'm probably going to ask you what might be most meaningful after I cover some other pieces. The first piece I'd like to share with you is a little bit of my journey, because I believe it will give you insight to why and how I do the work that I do. And then I'd like to share with you what I would call sort of the underpinnings of my work. That is, everything sort of flows from a certain core essence of how I see this work going into organizations. And then look at just some other stuff, things that I think, part of my desire is one, to connect with you and where you are. Another desire of mine is to disturb you. And I mean that in the most positive sense of disturbance. That is, that what we're doing is really different. And I'm wanting to maybe highlight, give pointers to some of those areas that to me are really essential qualities of difference, even though I know we won't have time to go into depth, at least not now. Perhaps we could go into depth at another session in the afternoon or in another place. So let me just start. Any questions of clarity before I move on into it? So here's where my story began. It happened in 1995, a summer day. I was in my corner office, CEO of the organization I've been a part of it's my organization. I'm the owner and CEO, 1995, about 12 years at that point. I've been a part of that organization. We have 50 people. We do IT training. It's highly competitive. My wife came into my office to visit me, completely unrelated to work. We had a conversation. She got to the door, she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Gregg, I don't like you at work. You're not the person I know." And then she left. And that was a startling moment for me, because as I sort of let that soak in, one thing I love about my wife is she is direct. You know, she will tell you where she is, and oftentimes the beauty's right there, but sometimes it's not. But she is always authentic in terms of where she is. So I was really grateful for her comment, because I realized I didn't like myself at work either. I realized I was CEO. I had played CEO now for 12 years. I wore suits and ties. I acted like a CEO. Anything I could imagine CEOs doing, that's a little strong. But basically, I played the role of CEO as I envisioned it. And there was my work life, and there was all the rest of my life. And they were very starkly different. I compartmentalized my work life. So that was disturbing for me to realize I didn't like who I was at work either, because I wasn't sure I knew another way. At the same time, throughout I like to think I still wasn't a traditional CEO. I had a yearning in me that was present the entire time of this 20-year business. And the yearning was I wanted people somehow, whether they're an employee or a customer or a vendor, that when they were touched by our business, I wanted some way, somehow, that they had a sense of being enriched by that experience. I didn't care how. I just, in some way, I wanted that experience to be something that enriched them. And so as I had this company for 20 years, I got, I think, better at what that might look like and what we might do to make that work. Any other highlights here? I think another significant event, just to hold with that, is I had a brother who died shortly after my wife made that statement. That was another disturbing event, because I really identified with his death. And I said, if that were me, would my life have been full right now? Would I have said, yes, I have lived what matters to me? And again, I didn't like my answer to it. I had really given everything to the business, at least that was my short version of where I was. And I was not satisfied that I was really doing meaningful things that mattered. So those things shook me up and started me on a path that brought me into NVC. And so the last 2 years I had that business, of the 20 years I had it, I went to an IIT. I heard about nonviolent communication. My wife put an article from Inbal on Mothering Magazine. My oldest daughter was 3 years old at the time, and we were remembering that moment in our kitchen where that same daughter had bitten her younger sister for the 4th time. And we looked at each other with that unknowingness of, what do we do? What do we do? Because we knew, both of us had experiences in our childhood that we knew we didn't want to repeat. Even though we hadn't talked about it, we were really clear, I don't see how to love her and yet to show that we don't agree with her behavior by hurting her. And that we simply weren't willing to do that. So the article came at a beautiful time, just prior to all that. And I call myself a sledgehammer spiritualist. So it's not enough to have one article. I need several things to lead me to my next evolutionary step of my spirituality. So several things had happened. I was exploring something else, and Marshall Rosenberg's name came up in it. So after about 3 or 4 of these hits, I said, okay, I'll go buy the book. I bought the book and was extremely moved. It seemed to hit on very meaningful things for me. And I thought, well, so I've got to go experience this. At that time, this was 2001, there's nothing going on the East Coast except Bay NBC up in New York City and Boston at that time, doing some colonializing up there of bringing NBC to the East Coast. But there was nothing else, right? Nothing else going on. So I found an IIT in Puerto Rico that I went to. So an IIT is an international intensive training that Marshall does. So it's 9 days immersion in NVC. So that was my first training. And what I like to describe is when I went to that, it's as though that commercial where the speakers are blaring and you're listening to the music and you're being blown back in your chair and your hair's blowing back. It was that experience of just, wow. You know, that you can read the book all you want, but you're not going to get that out of the book. And that for me, which is particularly empathy, and how absolutely stunningly beautiful, and how I had never experienced it, I knew nothing about it. How can you live to be, how old was I then? 41, and not have a clue that something so crucially important exists in the world. So I came back a very different person. I believe there should be a warning label on all NBC materials that if you're actually touched by it, you may do radically different things in the future than what you've done. That was true for me. So I came back and I could see I have now a tool, a possibility that's a quantum leap in the environment I want in my workplace. So the first people I shared it with were the people in my business. At this point, I'd been in the business about 16 or 17 years. The initial sharing of my work, of the IIT, my experience of the IIT with the people in my business, I had a lunchroom gathering. I shared as best I could just what that experience was like for me. And at the end of that sharing, I noticed there was a fellow who was a salesperson sort of in the back of the room. And I could see he was touched. He was crying in the back of the room. And you know, I noticed it, and as we kind of left the meeting, he came up to me and said, "Greg, can I talk to you a minute?" I said, "Sure." So we went on back to my office. And he opened up that something about what I had expressed had really connected with him. And it actually brought up things from his childhood, but things he was struggling with in his present life. And of course, as he was saying this, I was getting really excited. You know, this is it. The guy wants empathy. I've just been to a workshop. I know what to do, by golly. You know, so it's sort of immersion immediately when I get back. So we're in my office, and so, okay, just opens up, be curious, you know, connect with him, you know, feelings and needs. So I'm with him. He's in my office probably for an hour, and he's expressing things. I'm doing the best I can to hold the space, reflect back some feelings and needs, and we do this for a while, and then I notice he shifts, and he relaxes in his chair. Yeah, that's what I remember. That's what I saw. You know, wow, it must be going. And he starts laughing. He kind of gets giddy. And so then I get giddy. And he says, you know, here I am, not in my boss's office, but in my boss's office, spilling myself, my most, you know, these vulnerable pieces of my life. And we're laughing about it. And, you know, so I laughed too. It's just how beautiful that connection was, that here was a moment completely serendipitous, but that immediately flowed by just the sharing of an experience of NVC in the workplace. What I didn't know at the time, and he expressed to me probably 3 to 4 months later, is he said, "Can I meet with you again?" And he said, "I don't know if you know this, but when I came into your office, I was so close to thoughts of suicide, so close to what might I do with all the pain I'm holding. And that experience with you radically shifted the way I was holding the things that were going on in my life." Wow. You know, so,
Home run.
yeah, home run. And yet, you know, it's, I guess what I want you to see is almost the simplicity or the beauty of it just showing up, doing the best you can of making something happen. So that was the first experience of bringing NVC into my workplace, was that experience with that person. And the beauty of that for me was that I knew I wanted to bring this as richly as I could envision into the company that I had. So I was willing to bring whatever resources that I could bring into making this a reality. Not just the way we talk, but I wanted to look structurally. How are we organized? How are we making decisions? How do we make this be a place where people thrive? A place where people are enriched by being here. And it was a beautiful 2-year, 3-year experiment about what that might look like in the workplace that really impacted all aspects of how we showed up in the workplace. And there are too many pieces of that for me to share them in my very brief 1.5 hours here. Yes?
Can you share the piece about the downsizing? I think that's particularly striking.
Mickey is asking, there's a particular moment, in fact it happened relatively early, about 6 months into our implementation, my coming back from that IIT. Our industry was in decline. We were in the IT training business. IT departments were being outsourced to Indonesia, to India, various places, and we were seeing our client base completely disappear. And so we were finding ourselves with a very steeply declining revenue base. And it was clear we needed to make adjustments in our organization in order to live with the reality that we were facing. And I was clear, I'm not doing it the old way. I know the old way because I've done the old way, the pink slip sort of way of, you know, you and you and you. Sorry, it's your moment to leave. And what I did was essentially, the other irony of this is that the email I sent out was the day after Christmas, just in terms of the timing of what happens here. The day after Christmas, I send an email out that essentially expresses the reality that we're in, and that the only way I know for our survival is to make some decisions about how we cut costs, and the part of that reality is the only real way I see to cut costs are through people. Somehow, our salaries need to be lowered radically from what they are now. And I invited people to come for 2 days of meeting so that we can get in touch with what the needs of the individuals are, what the needs of the organization is, and so that we can then make these decisions. But that I wasn't going to make the decisions, and the management team wasn't going to make the decisions, that we were going to make those decisions through connecting to the needs that were alive. It was It was an intense 2 days. The first moment on a Thursday, which was right after the New Year, the whole company, we had 4 different locations, we all came into the office, and the first half of that day, they gave empathy to the CEO, me, about how they didn't want me to continue to put my money at risk, my family at risk, by going into further debt to prop up the company. That was not tenable for them. They did not want me to do that. And I was blown away at how they could see the cost of what I was doing and that I couldn't sustain that. Then we spent the afternoon getting in touch with each person's individual needs about what was their relationship with the company, particularly financially. What was the minimum level that you could joyfully work there? Joyfully was the key word. What minimum level of salary could you joyfully work here in this organization? And then I spent the afternoon just going around seeing how things were going, and what I saw was not a reluctance to cut, but in fact a willingness to cut so deep that it was painful for them. So that I remember in particular a woman in accounting who was just in tears. She said, I guess I could cut my salary to that, but I don't see how I could pay for my car. I don't see how I could pay for my child's daycare. And I said, whoa, you've cut too deep. Raise it back up. Because my concern is if it's not joyful, then it won't work for you and it won't work for us. So at what joyful level could you still be employed here? So we got clarity on that, and then the final day, Friday, we really made the decisions. But we made it in different groups. The administration group, the sales and marketing group, the instructional group. We did training in IT technology. Each of those groups met, and they had a budget that they needed to work with in terms of salaries. And at this point, each department was determining their own salaries, just to tell you how radically we integrated this. And so the issue was, here's your budget. What are you going to do with it? How are we going to work with that budget moving forward? What choices can we make to make that work? So, needless to say, there's a lot of anguish in places. At one point, a woman just could see, look, if we make these changes, I don't see how my job still makes sense here. Because what I want to do is manage a group of people, and it looks like at least 1 or 2 people are leaving in my group, and it simply isn't the sort of opportunity I want anymore. So I guess I'm one of the people that it's not going to work for, that it would make more sense for me to move on. Right? So that's the way one of them happened. The sales group struggled a lot more. There was a lot tougher way of seeing how we make the choices. At one point, they brought to the management team, and the idea of the management team is we were holding the needs of the whole. That is, could we still function as an organization with whatever cuts are happening? And we weren't deciding, but they said we're struggling between 2 options, A and B. And as they presented A and B, what we reflected back is, I don't see how we could function as a company if you do A. Now, I'm not saying that means do B. I'm saying A doesn't work. You have all the options still available to you, but B is the only one that seems to work from what you're offering us that would work. But ultimately, every group made the decisions about who would leave to meet those budgets in there. Yes?
What year was this?
This was in 2002, going into 2003. At the end of it, about, I believe, 6 people left the firm. Some of them, of the 6, 4 left immediately. That is, that was their last day. 2 of them stayed on. We had a circle at the end of that day, Friday. Immense pain in the room, right? Because I don't know how to change the pain that goes on in those kinds of decisions. But at least there's a way of holding the pain where we can all stay human while we make those decisions. And people got to express, the people who are leaving, the people who are there, what's it like for you? One woman came to me and she says, Greg, this is so horrible. I can't believe you put us through this. And I was kind of, not removed, I was certainly in the room, but I was absolutely glowing. Absolutely glowing, because I've been through this. I've been through it many times of needing to make these decisions. And I know it's painful, but I could see the beauty that was going on in the room of the way that we had done it. And I was really clear I would never do it another way again in terms of making that happen. And keep in mind, that was 6 months into an implementation. 6 months after that IIT I went to is when we did all this. So it's a lot can happen, I think, in terms of these. Yes? Yeah, we were always open financially, so people had full financial statements. That was always open. And we became open on salaries. So salaries were, I wanted each group to determine their salaries, which was a whole nother story in itself, but a very beautiful story. To me, salaries, the use of salaries is one of the key weapons of power over and keeping it secret. And so if you make salaries transparent, you do away with one of the most wicked tools of a power over environment that we have. Even though it goes counter to everything we know. No, I won't tell you how much I make. Even though we work together and we have a pretty good idea of what each, what the different roles are, right? But I think it's a very potent tool.
Clarifying question.
Yes.
You said each department got the budget.
Yes.
Who made that decision of what budget went to which department?
The management team, one level up. So the management team, we looked at here's what it looks like as a survivability sort of budget we can do, and then we allocated it. Keep in mind there's a person present from every group. At that point, I didn't know sociocracy or dynamic governance, which is what I integrate now. But I'll mention this in a little while, what we created was so close to what I see as sociocracy now. That is, I simply held a needs consciousness. What would that look like? How would that change the decision structure in the company? And we created circles. All kinds of things began to evolve that looked so like sociocracy that when I saw it, I trusted it. I knew that it held potency to hold the needs that we valued there. And it brought some things in that we hadn't really considered that made it much more robust and powerful than what we had before. So, yeah.
Can you define sociocracy?
I will. So I'm going to hold off on that right now. I'm going to come back to it. But I'll just simply right now, it is a governance structure that is about consent decisions. It shifts power from individuals into circles.
Sociocratic.
Say again. Yeah, so it's a sociocratic process. But the huge piece is a shifting of power, so that circles, groups of people hold power, and then the circles then empower individuals within their group. So a very different approach. But it keeps functional hierarchies. So in terms of getting work done, hierarchies are very effective in doing that. So it keeps the functional hierarchy, but redistributes the power. Coming back to it.
Two clarifying questions.
Yeah.
That 2 days that you described.
Yes.
Did you do that all on your own, or did you have any help from someone with more of these kinds of skills to design the process? Or help
So let me paint the picture. Virginia, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. The question is, did I have help in what was going on, some sort of level of support, or did I do this on my own? I don't have a sense of doing it on my own because somehow I was connected to something that was offering me support. But the picture is, I'm in Virginia. There is something going on in New York and Boston. The next nearest thing I see is probably, I don't know, Idaho, but California, right? Not Idaho. See, it was so far away I couldn't tell where it was. But it was on the West Coast. I was hoping I was hoping it'd be closer than that. Let me just say, it was so far away, and I was clear that bringing it into a business is a different beast than what I was experiencing elsewhere. And I had a lot of trust in my, at this point, 20 years of experience in business. And so I had a sense of, all right, no, I'm strapping myself in. I want, as best I know how, what a needs look at what is going on here, and to continue to make choices out of that place of needs. It was here, here was where I was checking in each time. Does it work? Does it really connect to needs? Are we holding needs? And of course, Lord knows there was many missteps and all that, and yet we can then make a new choice about how that might look different. So, yeah.
Have you talked to those people who left since?
I'm very close to those people who left. Ultimately, everybody left because I shut the business down and sold parts of it. The beauty was, those last 2 years, I was very transparent, even before this, that I wanted to get out of the business. I wanted to sell it or close it, and I ended up selling parts of it and then closing a part of it. And what, to this day, I'm so touched by is not one person jumped ship. Not one person said, "Whoa, well, this is closing down. I'm going to go find that next best opportunity."
I mean, from the 2 days, from those 4 or 6 people who left,
I'm very close to all of them. The one thing that I notice over and over again, because now I do, in a consulting role, do the same sort of thing. I love to be present when people are leaving a company. I love it because I know if I'm present that we can hold needs. And we'll hold the person's needs who's leaving if they're willing to stay present. Sometimes they're not willing to stay present. They leave. And so we can only invite, we can't make happen. But if they'll stay present, I'm absolutely sure we can hold their needs in the presence of the clarity that it's not working out in the organization. And for me, there's something in there that people leave, and it's as though, well, I hope another opportunity opens up for me where it does make sense, where my strengths would fit in the organization, or my life will change in a way that I'll have the space to bring more back into the company. But it leaves the door wide open. Because it's not that the person didn't work, it's that the role we had and the skills and the needs you have simply didn't mesh at that moment in time. Okay? That's all it is. And that if we're going to fulfill what we're there to do in a company, we need to make decisions like that. But we can do it in a way that holds you, if you're that person, so that we don't just throw you out. Or worse, we don't escort you out with a guard and you collect your belongings and leave without even saying bye to anybody. Where did that come from? You know, wow. So that sort of stuff, yeah. Yeah, okay. One more.
No, I just wanted to ask, maybe I didn't get it, but I'd be interested in finding out what you're doing now.
Yeah, good. Well, I'll keep going there. Whew. All right. So let me take you to, I ultimately sold that business. What I want to finish where I was and connect to. That not one person jumped ship. And in fact, what they said, several people said this. I'm still moved when I remember it. Gregg, I will be with you as long as you need me in this company. Wow. One fellow said, I'm not even looking for a job. You know, I'm with you. And I didn't know when that time would be. I couldn't say, well, December. At least, ultimately I could. But ultimately I said, we're going to slowly wind this down. And I'd like to keep making as much money as we can while we're in the process of it. And people were there. It was so vibrant. Those were the 2 richest years of my life in that business because of the quality of connections that came through that company. And in fact, I was so awestruck by that experience that that's what, as I was looking for what next, I was clear, I want this. That there is an ignorance of this in the world that I want to share. I want somehow to bring people into this quality of empathy, the quality of being that this process invites us into, and bring it into the workplace. Because that's where my experience was. I've been a business owner and CEO my entire life. And so it's easy for me to take that experience and then blend it with NVC. There was a struggle in me, though, as I was making that decision, that I was scared, even terrified, I think is closer to it, that I would begin doing this work, but I wouldn't do it with heart. That somehow I would take the heart out and try to change it in a way that I thought business would find it palatable. And every time I connected with that, I was clear, it was terror. I'm not willing to do this work that way. You know, and nothing against people who do the work that way. In my being, there was not a spaciousness to do that. And I became clear that the only way I'm going to do this work, if I do the work, is with upfront the fullness of what I see as the beauty of this process. And that if people aren't able to hold that, I'm okay with that, and I'll go somewhere else. But I'm wanting to hold the fullness of that beauty. I'm not willing to let go of it even for a second. So that my initial interaction with a potential client is at a level of seeking to connect with them about what needs of yours are met within this business and what needs are not. And would you like to explore how those needs that are not being met, my experience is that there are ways of bringing that into your business. Does that interest you or excite you? Do you have the spaciousness to consider that, or are you so glued on the bottom line that that's the only thing that is meaningful to you? But I finally got clarity that that was the way I was willing to do the work. And so I began doing this work as a consultant. And something beautiful about the work, the same week of the decision, I get a call from a woman, in fact, the woman who said, I can tell I don't have a place here anymore. She called me up, and she's working at a new company, and she said, you know, they've noticed I show up a little differently than everybody else here, and the owner of the company would like to have lunch with you because I told her about what happened in our business. So would you be willing to meet with her about NVC? Guess what I said. So I've actually had that sort of serendipity so many times in doing the work, which kind of continues to add to my trust. But that led to my longest engagement yet, which has been a 6-year engagement of bringing this process into a business. And it really became a very rich laboratory is much too sterile, a rich environment for me to explore ever more what this process looks like, how it shows up, how it's discovered. How the work I do not see as a creation, I see it as a discovery. I see that as we move into the place and hold needs consciousness, what emerges there? What emerges as a way, strategies, what emerges as a way of being with people, And there's something about, again, connecting with that there's some truth, truth with a capital T that I experience. So that I'm not creating structures, I'm discovering structures that make sense in these kinds of environments. That's at least the way I experience it. And so I see it as essentially public domain, right? I think that's what's important here, that it is what's there, and that as we mutually share this, we can build that public domain of what's there, of how this work shows up in businesses. The other big piece for me of deciding to do this work was the clarity that I have a family of 5. Right now I have 3 girls. They're 10, 11, and 13. A wife of 28 years that we've been married. And to choose to do this work, also something unique about the way I do it. I didn't have anything that I didn't have a consulting practice I was bringing NVC into. I didn't have a coaching practice I was bringing NVC into. I simply, my choice was, I'm bringing this process into the world as a business tool to help enliven businesses, to help create power with businesses rather than power over businesses. And I was aware there's not a ready market for that. There's not people already knocking on the door, that whatever's going on there, I'll need to do. So it was a significant choice to do that. And so another quality for me is that this goes into the kind of depth of choice that this is. That I experience this as a calling, that I cannot divorce the deep spiritual roots of this process from the process itself, so that it is inherently spiritual to me. That when we connect with needs in the way this process is meaningful to me, that to me is the divine footprint in each of us. And it's the resonating energy within each of us that we connect with. So I'm so thrilled to do work that for me has such a deep spiritual connection, and yet I can show up in a boardroom, and I don't ever use the word spirituality, or at least I use it consciously as I am right now. So I can talk about needs or what matters, and yet to me in that moment, we're really bringing a quality of experience among people without them, without them necessarily labeling it in a way that I think we often label it and maybe shy away from. All right, a little bit more you need to know about me. So as I moved into consulting, that I don't sell this work, ever. I don't sell it. Why do I not do it? Because it has no life in me. I'm only going to do this work in ways that are meaningful and matter to me. I don't care if that business adopts this. Is that too strong? That's probably too strong. I would love for them to do it. I'm not attached to them doing it in any way. I'm willing to meet them. I'm willing to inspire them in the ways that I have been inspired, to share with them perhaps those ways I've been inspired. And that is just touching them. Are you fulfilled? Are you, Mr. CEO, thriving in this business? Is it what you want? Is it meeting needs at the range of levels that you want? Relationships, meaning, quality of your experience? Do you wake up and say, another day at work, or something else? Because I certainly experienced my life for a period of dread of going into work. So I only inspire, and I am not in any way attached to whether people move forward. Now, these are not listed in the Best Business Practices book anywhere, as far as I know. And particularly the combination of it. I realize I'm limiting my market with many of the choices I'm making. But I also know that it's the only way it has life for me. And if it doesn't have life for me, I'd rather do something much easier that makes a lot more money. And every time I even imagine doing that, there is such pain and agony that goes on my being, just the imagining of it, that I say, okay, no, I'll keep doing the work. It works for me. Also, I don't see my work as problem solving. Of the calls I get, 90, maybe 95% are, we've got a problem, can you help us? I, so far, have not had any stickiness in those situations. Stickiness means a long-term engagement come out of those. I've had many short-term engagements. I'll do a workshop for them, or I'll come in and do a mediation for them, or something like that. But I find that that's not the work I'm interested in. I'm not interested in solving acute problems that are going on in an organization. How I would describe my work is as a transformational agent to bring cultural transformation of holding purpose along with people and holding them together. That's what I do. And if you're interested in that in any way, then let's talk more. But if it's something, if you just want to solve your current problem, sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say, you know, I know somebody who really enjoys doing that. And if I do say yes, it's at my premium price, so that if I do get the work, at least I'm okay with what I'm getting for it. So there's some real tangible compensation with it. But I'm looking for long-term engagements of organizations that want to value people with purpose. So, yes?
I think this is a clarifying question, if it isn't, please. Have you found that sometimes the acute problem is an entryway into a bigger transformation?
So the question is, have you found that the acute problem is an entryway into a larger engagement?
That's not what I say.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. It's
Turn it on.
Green.
It's not.
No.
It is green, but it takes a time even when it's green. See? What a metaphor. So I see that sometimes an acute problem is a manifestation of a larger potential transformation, and whether or not it leads to a longer engagement is not the question. But have you found a way to connect with the potential larger transformation and show it to the person who comes with the acute problem?
Yes. So my experiences in the work I've done, where I've met a lot of those acute problems, is that they haven't translated into that, at least not in the immediate moment. I do believe there's no work we do in this in any way that isn't meaningful. That there is any step, no matter how small, is meaningful toward taking us toward this kind of way of doing business and of relating to one another. But my experience is that it has not resulted in what you're saying, at least not in the short order that I would like it to. Because partly, well, how to say, it simply isn't work I'm looking for. I believe it's very valid work, and that I'm delighted that people are doing that work. I do have hope that ultimately we will make an impact by having those sorts of engagements. They simply aren't meaningful to me in terms of what I want to do, what I choose to do. But I believe it certainly is possible. I just haven't experienced it yet. Not one of mine that I've gone into solve an acute problem have turned into a long-term engagement.
So, Greg, I was hearing Mickey's question in a way that might be different from how you heard it.
Okay.
How I heard it is, let's say you just have one day to work with a person, you're never going to be back. Is it possible in that single experience you have to tap into the transformative potential so as to generate more meaning for you and to open their eyes in a way that they might not otherwise? You may never go back, but is it possible to experience the wholeness of that?
I think that's true. I'm remembering a recent training. I did a training in West Virginia for the Federal Public Defender's Office in West Virginia. People who represent people who have done federal crimes of one way or the other, and they're the assigned public defender on it. So a group of attorneys, primarily, and then their support staff. And what I found in that, in any of the work, so I show up fully when I give my 1 day or 1.5 day workshops that people ask for. And there certainly is a touching. In that group of just a random business, I would say 10 to 15% of the people are touched, right? And that there's a range of people that sort of get it. And then the rest of them, probably half of it, I think they enjoyed the experience at some level, but they're so far from getting it that it's not, I'm not sure it would go anywhere with them. But in this case, the director of this program had recently had cancer. And the group said since she had cancer, she came back very differently. She's an attorney, directs the group, and she was the most open of the entire group of what was happening there. So I definitely saw some openness, you know, and we'll see. So in a way, I believe, no doubt there was an impact there, and I believe it will continue to have fruits down the road. I'm not sure what they will look like. In terms of tangible income to me, There may be something. We've actually had some additional interactions.
I'm withdrawing my question. Neither what you answered directly nor Jeff's re-rendition.
None of it met with you.
But it's okay, I'll take it offline.
Good, we'll go. We gave it a go, Mickey. Yours is her question too? You share it?
Exactly what I thought, yeah.
Her question.
And it's beautiful just to have the question.
Yeah.
And, right.
Good. Well, I would like to connect with it later. All right. Yeah, thank you, Wes. I saw that look. I know what it means. Get on with it. So I want to share with you these underpinnings. But what is it when I go into a workplace? What is it? How do I approach it? What is the process? And I'd like to extend what Marie was sharing with you earlier, and I'm going to label it levels of needs consciousness. And as she was drawing here, that as we look at levels of needs consciousness, if we're learning this process, that the first level is to get connected to my own needs, right? And that a whole lot of the work that those of you who are engaged in NVC is about connecting to my own needs. Am I able to do it at any time? Am I able to do it in those times when I'm stimulated? And so I just want to differentiate. So I'm digging deeper into what Marie shared with you, that for the most part, the world doesn't exist in that circle. The world exists in the dot. That is, I'm not conscious of my needs. I'm going through the world unconscious of needs, reacting to the things in my environment. And so by learning NVC, we're wanting to be the fullest I can be, connected to my needs, making choices out of my needs in as many moments as I'm possibly able to do that. A full I. And that's not easy, to show up with the fullness, to show up authentically, to show up aware of my needs, to speak from my needs in the many moments, the scary honesty that comes out of that. So as if that isn't enough, sort of traditional NVC brings the next level, which is, okay, if you have some proficiency in connecting to your own needs, now are you also able to connect to the needs of another? To open yourself up so that you can find that same quality of experience in another human being that you might be with. The process of empathy, of presence. And that too is NVC is a skill that we can learn how to do that. It's not just go love unconditionally, it's here's the process. Here's a way of moving into that space so that you can create tangible skills to do that. So needs awareness is not a wish, it's a skill set. And that's pretty hard too. Being able to just give someone that presence. And then this was the space that I was particularly enjoying exploring, and I call it the we space, that when we choose to create an organization, because we choose to do it. Every organization that's out there, someone had an idea, created it, and it now exists. So there are creations that we have. That when we do that, as I was exploring this space, first in my own business and then in others, I wanted to understand something else mattered here. And it moves to what I call either the needs of the we or the needs of the whole. That there are needs that emerge when we come together as a group of people with a purpose. And as I was holding it in the context of the work that I was doing, I recognized three different aspects of what these needs of a whole are for me as I was seeing them in the kinds of organizations that I wanted to create, which are living organizations. Living organizations that integrally value human beings, that integrally value larger living systems. The earth, for instance. that they're self-organizing and self-correcting, just qualities of a living organization. So the first of these is what I have labeled historically shared purpose, and we could also call shared purpose and shared values. But, oops, excuse me. For me, it's what I call the heart transplant of an organization. So that in a traditional organization, if I'm the CEO, I matter. And you matter much less if you're the people in the organization, right? And that the attention is focused on me or your manager or whomever that is, as their needs matter more, and the consciousness is about what does the boss want. Whatever that is, the focus is on this human being and how do I work with this human being to give them what they want. And I'm not accountable to anybody, except maybe the board if I'm the CEO, if I have a board. Otherwise, I pretty much can do what I want. In this system, I am it. I'm the one that matters. Any of you experienced a system somewhat like this? Are you looking up, I hope? Getting the full experience of that. All right. Ooh, that was kind of fun. So it intrinsically matters to us, that it gives meaning to our presence in this organization. And we craft that in a way that we each have input to that and choice around what that looks like in our working group. And once we create that and we consent to it, that is, we give consent by saying, yes, that speaks to me, that this shared purpose intrinsically motivates me to be a part of the organization. And that becomes what's in the focal point of our organization. That's it. If that's our shared purpose, that's what we focus our energies on. That's why we're here. And if I'm the CEO, I'm with you, held accountable to the same shared purpose as each one of us. There's mutual accountability here. So the heart transplant, as I'm working with organizations, is that shift. That it's no longer, the power is not held in people, the power is held in essentially circles of people. When I brought this work into my business before I knew sociocracy, that same initial period that I was saying the first 6 months, I had 3 rules of thumb about how I envision the change. Rules of thumb mean they're not strictly true, but they point in the direction that I want to be pointing in. The first of those was no power over. The second of those is no secrets. And the third of those is no privilege. That's what I wanted in my organization. And of course, we can translate those into needs. No power over. Of course, I hate to say the word power over without power under, because it's a complicit system. No power over, power under. So a desire of mutuality of power, of inclusiveness and choices about what we do within this organization. And about mutuality, that what applies to one of us applies to all of us. About inclusiveness. All right, so that's the first aspect of the shared purpose. And in fact, the second very often is integral to the first, but I put it explicitly here. And it is intrinsically valuing human needs. Intrinsically. What I mean by intrinsically is I don't want an organization, let me say this accurately. What I value is an organization that holds human needs with purpose, that holds them equally, not as an either-or, but as a both-and. That it's a willingness to fulfill purpose, but not at the expense of human beings. It's a willingness to fulfill purpose and value human beings. And in fact, I'd like to expand on that because the we is ultimately larger than that. It's really all life that we're valuing. But if we could just start with the human beings, that'd be a wonderful place to start. And then we'll expand it out to all life as we get that. Hold them mutually together. I don't want valuing human beings to be seen as a means to an end. And this is one fear I have is that if valuing human beings is seen as a means to increase profitability of a domination structure that exists, and I'm really torn with this, but I want you to hear my tornness. On the one hand, there's a sense that I can impact that system and change it by bringing it in. That if I bring empathy in, I will begin to see an impact of an experience of empathy on that group of people. I love that. I want that to happen. I actually believe it does happen. But the fear in me is I'm feeding the monster. I'm giving the monster new tools to manipulate people in ways they didn't have before, to enhance the domination structure that, in fact, it's the structure that I am so adamantly opposed to. It's the more I do this work, the more I realize it's the structures we've created that hold the seed of violence in our systems. The structures are it. And if we don't work on the structures, you know, the people showing up in ways we call violently, to me, are just the way we cope with these weird systems, these non-living systems, right? We find ways of doing it, but we're doing the best we can in these very harsh systems. So I'm really clear. I want to be transforming the systems. So please hear my tornness about that. I know in the work I do, I'm wanting people that want to change the system. And that there is some glimmer, at least in their eyes and in their expression, of intrinsically valuing human beings. It doesn't have to be the whole boat, but if there's just a glimmer of it, I believe we can seize on that and move into it. And there's something that happens that when we're in a group and we individually consent that the group we're creating will value human values, human needs, there's qualitatively a difference in that than in just I value human needs. There's something really magical that happens, that now we've created a group whose very basis says we value human needs. And that as other people come into the group, you are holding that as mattering.
Clarifying question.
Yes. Excuse me, I take the clarifying question and I'll come back. Yes.
So would there be one more circle that has to do with the needs of the system?
Okay.
Which there is a lot of work being done on.
Right. I believe, and Mickey and I have had some conversation about this, that to me needs only flow through human beings. Needs are a purely human, purely living quality. Now, there is a system and there is a structure, but I'd see no needs that flow from that. It's only needs from human beings, right? Its don't have needs for me. There is no connecting energy to an it. There is a connecting energy to a human being. And so this quality of we-ness that I'm talking about is my experience when we come together and say this matters to us as to how we define the organization. They immediately become needs we share mutually among us, but they're really my needs and your needs now, and we've committed that they matter in the context of the organization. But needs for me only flow through life. That's the only way I can connect with them. Tangible energy.
Can I ask a question?
Wait, I want to go back to her. She said, could you say that again?
There's a qualitative difference between individuals holding a sense
Yes.
that everyone's needs matter and the group holding a sense that everyone's needs matter. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. That we are actually creating, we are birthing a new living entity here. I mean, that's the qualitative difference. That when we create a we, the way I'm holding this, we are birthing a new thing. We are creating something that has a purpose that moves us as human beings to want to fulfill that purpose. And in doing so, it comes to what I would describe as an experience of community. That when we create this and we define the community that matters to us, and then each of us consent to that, there is a surge of power in the moment of doing that. That, again, it's a little bit like describing empathy. I have a hard time doing that. But there's something that happens in that space that I find extremely potent. And so let me not fill it with more words.
I just wanted, I'm still trying to get just that clarity between the needs of an organization and your...
Let me go one more step because I think it'll get clearer. Because there's a third aspect to what I see as needs of the we. That is, once we've created this organization, that is, the organization itself needs to thrive. Right? If we're going to carry out the purpose that matters to us, then we need all the things that any organization needs. We need resources, financial resources, human resources, equipment. We need, structures, processes, essentially the needs that businesses and nonprofits have that we know about. These are not new needs. They are the vitality of an organization. They still aren't a need of an it, and I want you to hear that. They're a need of a we because I care about the purpose. I am fulfilling this purpose through the organization, and so the thrivingness of the organization matters. If it's not sustainable, we will cease to be able to fulfill the purpose in the context of this organization. So they always come back to the human quality. Our organizations only, flourish in this quality of needs through the human beings that make them up.
And what I get in what you're saying is that it is the life force of the human beings that are coming together in that, and it's that.
Yes.
It's not.
It
has its own life force, but it's only sustained by that.
And through a consciousness of needs at all times once I'm in that organization, not letting go of it.
Yeah.
So that I'm moving around in that organization fully conscious of the needs of the creation, of the birthing of this entity, and making choices out of that. I'm making choices out of all of these needs. And that's the challenge. Yeah. And to me, that's what leadership is in this new paradigm.
So the living organism is the consciousness
that
we are coming together with.
Yes.
That's it.
That's right. And the needs that flow from that consciousness, the tangible needs that, in this case, we create this we. There are we's we don't create, like the earth. Yeah. And because there's a whole bunch of we's, right? This is just the we that we're creating in the organization, but there's all kinds of we's out here. Ever-enlarging we's. One of these is the earth, right? We didn't create that, but we live on it, and it's clearly a we. And it has needs of its own sustainability. So we can recognize it as a system larger than us, of which we are part of, and has needs, because it's life. All right. Let me check in with myself. My intention is to stimulate you greatly, and so that we have things to bring into our other sessions. And also, I want to be sure you leave with a certain body of things that are important to me to share. All right, I have 7 minutes. I'd like to use my next 7 minutes, so we still have 15 minutes of questions, to give you more of this infrastructure that at least I see is basic to what I'm doing. Another quality of the we that I haven't mentioned is it matters who's in it. It matters who's included, that we have clarity about who's included. That part of defining the we is who's included. And a part of who's included, because it's not static but dynamic, how do people enter into the we and how do people exit from the we? Both of those matter. And in fact, my understanding of creating this quality of a living entity that fulfills a purpose is I actually want that very dynamic. I want people coming in and I want people going out. I want to hold the purpose with why we're there and ensure that we're fulfilling that purpose in all ways. And we're making choices out of that. And that's very different than most of our organizations right now. I want to celebrate a choice that someone's not working in the organization. I want to come to it with joy because we're holding what matters about why we're coming together. And we're going to hold the needs of that person. Because I want them to find the place they can contribute. There's lots of we's out there. Find your we, if this we isn't the we for you. So the intention is that those need to be defined as well. Clarity of who's included, how people come in, how people go out. Okay, hang on. Unless it's purely a question of clarity, I want to hold them. Give me another 6 minutes, okay? You willing? Yeah. Barely? Maybe not even quite? Is it a question of clarity or is it something stimulated?
Well, the work I'm doing is...
I can already tell. Would you be willing to hold it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm really intrigued with where you're going with it in terms of the bigger triple bottom line and quadruple bottom line.
Okay. Hang on. there is a piece here, next level. Just all I'm going to do is give you a context for this. So the focal point is needs. Yeah, I'm coming for a tool. Oh, very good. I missed it. Thank you. Don't need it. So the focal point is this needs consciousness. And then if you'll kind of scope in this part, what I call the fabric of community. So what tangibly comes out of this consciousness? How do we hold the space for this sort of community, this sort of organization to exist? And so for me, there are qualities that really matter in this sort of community. And you can see them up here. Clarity of self-responsibility. How am I giving my responsibility away? How am I taking on responsibility for others? Each person being 100% responsible. That all accountability is mutual, not a boss and subordinate, but a mutual accountability toward the shared purpose.
Is all this stuff something that you're going to...
I'll give it to you in a handout, right? That working relationships matter. Do we have the ability to work through the issues of working relationships? Basically, this is the you part. The ability to have interactions with others at a needs level. So this is more traditional NVC here. And I also emphasize the working relationship. So it's not about intimacy. It's about having a connection at a needs level with the colleagues that you work with. A skill of self-connection and self-care so that you can show up fully as an I. That development, excellence matters, so that that's a piece of what holds this community together. Ownership. Essentially, that each of us have full autonomy within some domain of the organization. Each of us has a domain. And that the desire is that you embrace that fully. And that there's a holding of my domain and then the larger wholes that I am connected to, aware of, and contributing to the needs of the whole as I also fulfill my domain. And then a culture that includes the structure that I described, sociocratic structure, dynamic governance, power. This is really a huge one. Power with leadership. What does leadership look like in this sort of structure? And that it's a living human system. Yeah, so I'm not wanting you to fully grasp all this. I'm wanting you to see that this is where I moved to from this place. And in fact, for instance, I have a program, a one-year level 1 program for people in businesses. And these, in fact, are what, over the course of the year, we focus on in tangible skills development within an organization, just to make it very particular and specific. 1 minute. All right, I'm going to take my 1 minute. Anything else I want to mention? Oh, there's so many more exciting things. Well, so I'm just going to mention this in my last minute. Part of my discovery in bringing this into organizations was my own discovery in NBC that there is what I call a fierce quality. It's a connected fierceness, though. It's not a destructive fierceness. And I so celebrate discovering that. I found it in my personal development. I spent several years developing my gentle qualities, which I needed. And so I learned about this quality of empathy. I learned about connection, the warm glow of, wow, either in a group or one-on-one empathy, isn't this sweet and rich and warm? And after a while, I realized there's something I'm wanting, something I'm yearning for that we can, how many NBC practice groups are we going to do? Yeah. And then finally, there was a sense of this calling in me is the fierce quality. And so while this other one is this horizontal connected experience, this is a directional, purposeful quality. And wow, when I found that, it's like, I'm alive again! Yay! I found it. There's some expression that was just yearning to come out. And if we're not bringing that quality into our businesses, you won't fly at all. right? You won't even get in the door probably. So I encourage you to nurture a fierce quality that is still deeply connected to needs. What I really celebrate about this is for the masculine, the men in the world that I experience, is we're either expressing this quality in us and it's coming out violently and destructively, and our prisons are filled with that, or we're suppressing this quality and we're not bringing this energy into life. And so this awakening to me is we can be alive. We can connect to the bigness of the fierce life in us and bring it out in a way that's connected. And we can do that in our organizations and we can do it in ourselves. And in fact, I'm finding the work I'm doing is really about both of these, both the gentleness and the fierceness. The work we're talking about is really about coming alive. Can we come alive in ourselves? Because until we come alive in ourselves, then this circle gets really small. If you're afraid of showing up because you're going to be fired if you do, just notice your circle just went in. But if you can find a way to show up, even at the possible cost of not being employed there anymore, your circle just got bigger. And where's Pat? Fear. I'm very clear that if you're making a decision out of fear, I'm worried because I'm not trusting you're connected to needs. But when you do an action out of fear, I celebrate because you're making a huge hurdle if you're connected to needs in terms of what's going on. And to me, that's the way we make the I really big. Okay, I took more than my minute, but I just took an extra one because I want to be sure I would have room for questions. Yes?
I wanted to ask about the Earth thing because
Yep.
you mentioned purpose. This is very interesting to me because I do vision, mission, things like that, which is, I think, very related closely. So I was wondering whether the purpose of an organization doesn't have to do with the connection between the we and the Earth.
What I'm wanting is that when we make decisions in an organization, that we are holding the fullness of the needs. And those needs, they can get really big. So clearly they're the needs of our group and our organization, the we at that level, those things expressed over there. But to me, they're the needs of the we. of the earth as well. So am I making a decision in a way that I'm creating an earth that is ever more healthy, or am I making a decision at the expense of the earth?
I think I'm talking exactly about the shared purpose. Does the shared purpose focus on what do we do for the earth?
It can. It's completely your creation. You're including life in there. So if that really matters to your group, you include it in your shared purpose. Just like I will for sure want to see human needs being valued in that shared purpose. So you can say we also, with clarity, want to make decisions that hold the needs of the earth. And let's even extend it a little more. That is, we are so often just conscious of life here now. Do we not also want to be making decisions that serve life 2, 3, 5, 7 generations from now? Are we really holding and nurturing our decisions in that light? So are we holding needs another we here? Is life yet to come? Are we holding that? I'd like to think we are. I'd like to think that we are making decisions from that place. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how does empathy play into your model? What you connect it to the different components?
Well, it really shines here. Empathy is the core part of working relationships. But all of it's showing up with needs. And so if I'm going to show up and connect around needs, I'm either expressing my own needs or connecting empathically with the needs of others. So it shows up all the time. Of another human being's needs, yes. Or self-empathy within myself, yes. And there's a clarity in here, and I heard it come up in some conversation. In terms of self-responsibility, I want to be sure people are clear that you're responsible for your own needs, including your need for empathy. So I want to acknowledge, and I can see and value that a person has a need for empathy, and I'm curious, how are you choosing to meet that need? What are you doing? Because it's your need. It's not mine, and it's not ours. It's your need. Right? So that there's a conscious choice about how you're meeting those needs. Now, if I'm creating this sort of organization, then I want to create structures that hold needs. So I'd like to think that we've created structures that recognize the need for empathy. I at least like to think the need for empathy is as big as the need to go to the bathroom. So have we somehow held it in a way that there's a place to go for empathy, that there are resources and a physical place where empathy could happen? I think it's more important than going to the bathroom, frankly. Sometimes.
How long can you go without it?
That's right. But it's integral to what's going on here, empathy. But clarity of your own responsibility for that empathy. So you're having a meeting. That doesn't mean the meeting goes to the empathy of one person in that meeting because they're in pain. In fact, I don't want it to go there unless we consciously as a group choose to go there.
You mentioned the word structures in that last answer, and I appreciate that you brought that up. And I'm really curious to know if you can, you listed some examples of structures that you had put in your old business, but I'm wondering if you could give maybe a few more examples of structures that have really, you've seen successfully intrinsically valued human needs, those structures that have done that very well.
Well, the huge one, the heavy lifter in all this for me is sociocracy or dynamic governance. So, or dynamic self-governance. It goes by several names. I now call it dynamic governance. It does the heavy lifting for me of holding needs in an organization. It creates a decision-making structure. It creates several qualities of how we, in terms of when we meet with one another, how we hold one another. And it differentiates the difference in power structure. So it has an enormous amount of structure that holds needs for me. I'd also like you all to hear, I know some of you have experienced sociocracy, that sociocracy was not created, or dynamic governance was not created with a needs consciousness. So it was, in fact, it was created sort of with a scientific consciousness of bringing things using systems theory and cybernetics into the social structures. And so I like that. And so to me, I trust those sort of sciences in creating it. But I want to see it through a needs consciousness. And the work I've done envisions, perceives sociocracy or dynamic governance through a needs consciousness. And so many of the strategies that are used are different than what I see in traditional sociocracy because they're based on needs, not on other things. And I completely integrate dynamic governance with NBC. I want it seamless. I don't want people to see it as two processes, even though we can talk about them. I'm wanting them to see that we're bringing a needs consciousness and skills of meeting each other in a place of needs, and that these are simply processes that we're bringing in to do it, but fully integrated. Yes?
I have a follow-up question about sociocracy. I have a follow-up question about sociocracy. In the way that I understand it, I obviously know a whole lot less than you. I have seen it as containing two, in my mind, separatable parts. One is an organizational structure part, and one is a decision-making process. And in other words, you can create the circles and the double linking and all of that, and then each circle can use a whole number of decision-making processes within the circle. I want to know if that's consistent with your understanding.
At the circle level, that decisions are made by consent is defined by dynamic governance or sociocracy. But as you hand off those domains, they can be made in any way. Essentially, the circle decides who decides. And that decision by the circle is always made by consent. It's an inclusive quality.
What I'm saying is the particular form of making decision by consent, even calling it decision by consent, that is kind of like a compartmentalizable thing, and you can insert a different kind of decision that the circle can make. If this is not clear, I will take it off.
I think it's clear. So you're saying rather than consent, and I'll check with you, rather than consent, there is another kind of decision process, because I know your next session is about decision processes. So my sense in terms of a needs consciousness, if it's still holding needs, then I'm all for it, that I could see that. It is one of the principles of dynamic governance that decisions are made by consent. And that has its own defined process. But what I'm most interested in is needs consciousness, right? Yeah.
First of all, thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled to pieces with what I've been hearing. I am particularly interested in addition to the deep and ongoing work of living NVC consciousness, in scaling it down to its smallest, most adaptable, user-friendly, interchangeable, offerable to people in a chance meeting in the street, etc. So my question to you is, as you do this, for example, year-long work, are people getting things that they can take home after an hour session and start using with themselves, their families? Very, very user-friendly, adaptable, non-complex.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it meets your bar of that very user-friendly. I would say right now, I'm doing a lot of this training with Wes, at least in this program that I just described. It's the level 1 program, of which there'll be multiple levels. I would say it's workplace-oriented. I'm not so sure it's making it really easy. I'm not sure it's meeting your criterion that's there. I see a value in that. The territory is ripe with how do we do it, and how do we make it work like that very quick conversation in an elevator and things like that.
But
in addition to, yeah, another way, right? There's also a struggle for me about, and Wes and I have had some conversation, I've heard it been brought up here, that is, I basically hold that what I see we need is to bring a critical mass of people with a depth of consciousness to make this happen. Now, saying that, there's clearly a need for structures that enable it to happen in easy ways in a variety of kind of the things you're talking about as well. Simple structures that lead us toward this. And then there's a skill set. To me, it's consciousness, structure, skills, that all of those matter. And I believe, at least in the things I'm creating, that the consciousness is the rate-limiting piece. That I'm really wanting the program that I've created, of which level 1 is just a beginning, level 2, level 3, is to develop, the intention is to develop that consciousness in people who are going out into organizations so that they can hold it. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to go all the way in the back. I skipped over you, actually, Gail.
So I really enjoyed your presentation. I found that you brought in many elements of things. Can you people in the corner hear me?
Barely. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to speak louder and be the CEO.
Would you mind using, because I'm recording?
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of elements that you brought in of things that I've wondered about how to incorporate, exploring bringing NVC in a workplace environment. So I was one of those people moved, at times, to tears. So thank you. And my question is, what kind of support do you find yourself needing from a community of people like this?
You're going to take me to tears with that. Yeah.
We can't do this alone.
We can't do it alone. I think that needs to be a session. Yeah. I think that's big. But I will just say, I'm at a place in evolving this work. I spent the first 7 years just doing the work. I didn't share it. I didn't do public workshops on it. I shared NVC, but not the organizational work. And since 2008, I've begun sharing publicly what the work is. And I would say I'm just at the cusp right now that what you just mentioned touches me deeply, because that's where I see it's ready for. It's ready for this ripening, this movement in and beyond, and that it's the fullness of a vast set of resources that are bringing the work out. And I feel it very personally, that I'm doing things that I believe, I would love to spend all my time on the development of this work, and yet I'm spending a whole lot of my time on marketing and things that I believe many people could do. And so, yes, I'm deeply wanting that the work is at a place ready to move beyond the simple beginnings that I see where it's originated. So thank you. Thank you for the question, yes. Anyone else? right at the time. Maybe, all right, one more question and we have two hands. Okay, yes?
Well, looking at the needs of the Earth and the whole, climate change, human survival, and then the little needs of the I, which is not always good for the whole. Can you say something how the needs of the Earth and our climate change and corporate decisions, because the corporate decisions are not always Earth-friendly.
So current structures don't work from needs, right? They work from a different level. Most corporate structures are around maximizing profitability, or earnings, or income, usually to a privileged few, shareholders and key managers. So there's not much place for the Earth in that, or there's a willingness, unless I have to see the Earth, that I would rather continue forward. So all this is an invitation to see it differently, and to bring a different aspect of seeing how we show up in our workplaces. To me, this is where we're moving, so that the Earth is included in those decisions, and right now it's simply not. It doesn't come up on the radar, except as to stay out of trouble. Don't get in the hot fire of other things happening. I'm not sure that answered your question, but I just see what you're posing is just the world as it is. This is the movement toward that I see as valuable so we begin to make different choices.
And where I see a breakdown in communications is that everybody's just emailing and texting, even in the same room.
Yeah. So the way we choose to meet needs of connection, I wonder if it's really meeting them. Texting has a certain beautiful aspect and potential, and why am I texting the person sitting right next to me? Unless it's for fun. My wife just started using it, and we did that, and we get some giggles out of it. But beyond that, I don't know why one would do it. Yeah, so there's some real challenges that we're looking at. Hey, can I come to you? Mm-hmm.
Just really quick, you mentioned like a one-year program, or
yes.
That's a way. How does that kind of work, just really briefly? I know we don't have too much time.
Yeah, the real brief part is it focuses on that. There's a brochure that I've left over on the table, so you can look at that. You can talk to me anytime about it. Good, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.